Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, entrepreneur and technophile Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Here I am, the golden stallion of the tech world, ready for another great episode of Sovryn Tech. Every episode of Sovryn Tech is great. Well, maybe that's not true. But I got a great email from a listener, and in the email, the listener said, Brian Sovryn, you're like a sex-crazed Captain Picard, right down to the impassioned monologues. Can you get a greater compliment than being compared to Captain Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation? I assume you know what that is, especially if you listen to this show. But anyway, I thought that was pretty classy of the person to say. That was nice. So anyway, if you're hearing this, you may, I am actually, obviously all my shows are pre-recorded and kind of pre-released a little bit. I am actually at the Anarchy in the NYC, if you're hearing this, and it looks like it's going to be a great time. So if you happen to be hearing this and then you happen to be coming to Anarchy in the NYC on Saturday, April 20th, I believe. April 20th, come say hi. Say, hey, Brian Sovryn, how you doing? No problem. And I always love meeting a listener. So anyway, let's move on. Let's get right into the stories. This first story, we got a really, really interesting one to go over. This is from the RT. They always have really, really great news stories, it seems. RT, of course, means Russia Today, meaning that it's kind of like a Russian paid for. I mean, a lot of their studios are based in America, but, it's bought and paid for by the Russians. Some people don't trust that. Personally, I trust it just fine. And in fact, RT on the air, you can watch RT. It's kind of a 24/7 news service, and you can actually watch it. If you go to RT.com, you can actually watch, just like you would watch Fox News or CNN. And if I do ever care to actually watch a news station, I go to RT.com and I just watch the RT. They usually, again, cover more interesting stories, and they give a pretty good critical eye. Kind of an outside looking in, even though they're still on the inside. They give a really good critical eye on America, and they do a much better job of covering world news because CNN, Fox, and MSNBC and them, they usually are very American-centric. And if they're not being American-centric or United States-centric, they're certainly looking at things from a United States perspective, which frankly is pretty narrow, in my opinion. So anyway, this is a pretty cool story, I don't know if it's cool, but it's an interesting story. And it's Pentagon's DARPA preparing to equip robots with real brains. Now, DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And it's a government organization, and they come up with all these supposedly, really high-tech solutions, and they come up with all these, supposedly all this new technology, and they have the best brains in the country and all this stuff. They've been credited with inventing a few different things, but anyway, let's go ahead and start reading the story. Is the Pentagon trying to freak us all out, or do they just want to give zombies something to eat? The Department of Defense is reportedly almost finished building robots with quote-unquote real brains. That's according to National Defense Magazine, which this week profiled the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, again DARPA, lab, and a little-known project that has sucked down millions of dollars during the last few years. Millions of dollars spent trying to replicate the human brain. Now, a lot of people will often be very critical of DARPA because of exactly just that, what this article mentioned, is that money just seems to get sucked in to this, and nobody, half the time you don't even see anything come out of it, or at least you don't publicly see anything that comes out of it. And there's just millions and millions of dollars that go into DARPA, maybe perhaps billions, that we just seems to get lost track of. Anyway, we'll continue. National Defense Magazine's Sandra Irwin explores the Physical Intelligence Program this week, a research and development initiative launched back in 2009 in order to understand intelligence as a physical phenomenon and to make the first demonstration of the principle in electronic and chemical systems, according to the Defense Department's original solicitation. That was in quotes. Irwin says that 4 years later, a team of scientists led by University of California, Los Angeles chemistry professor James K. Gimzewski is just, quote-unquote, inches away from the finish line in terms of reaching their goals. So they're saying they're pretty close to putting, quote-unquote, real brains into robots. Gimzewski and crew have constructed a tiny machine, Irwin writes, that allows robots to attack independently. How independently? It won't rely on convention computer code used to program cyborgs and robots like the kind found in Hollywood sci-fi flicks, but instead use microscopic wires to emulate the electrical and chemical pulses sent from cell to cell within the human brain. In quotes, rather than move information from memory to processor like conventional computers, this device processes information in a totally new way, says the scientist. Irwin continues, what sets this new device apart from any others is that it has nanoscale interconnected wires that perform billions of connections like a human brain and is capable of remembering information, Gimzewski said. Each connection is a synthetic synapse. A synapse is what allows a neuron to pass an electric or chemical signal to another cell. Because its structure is so complex, most artificial intelligence projects so far have been unable to replicate it. You've probably heard the phrase, like the person's synapses were firing. That's another way of saying kind of that they were thinking. According to DARPA, the objective of the implementation domain is to demonstrate the first human-engineered open thermodynamic systems that spontaneously evolve non-trivial intelligent behavior under thermodynamic pressure from their environment, meaning that these brains can be creative. That's the short term for what they're trying to say, is that it can figure things out. The objective of the analysis domain is to develop analytical tools to support the development of human-engineered, physically intelligent systems and to understand physical intelligence in the natural world, the agency writes. On the website for UCLA's Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department, the goal of the Physical Intelligence Program is described a bit more succinctly. The project will not only lead to fundamental understanding about various physical and biological self-organization systems and origin of intelligence, but also practical applications such as the creation of next generation of electronic circuits with intelligent behaviors and dynamic interactions / control of biological systems, says UCLA's Young Chen. So clearly they're trying to wrap this story up in the idea that, this is going to help us understand humanity better. This is going to, there's so many wonderful things, to get from this. Dr. Gimzewski tells National Defense Magazine, that's amazing to me that there's a National Defense Magazine, that I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, what you call it? I mean, it might as well be called, it should be called National Offense Magazine for one. But anyway, sometime I'll have to look into what that magazine is all about, because that just sounds like the worst joke in history. Again, Dr. Gimzewski tells National Defense Magazine that a team of scientists have made great strides in the multi-million-dollar project, even if it's the most ambitious one he's seen yet. But what happens when it's finally complete? In quotes, it is not clear, however, that the Pentagon is ready to adopt this technology for weapons systems. Yeah, there is the rub, writes Irwin, citing a Defense Department policy statement from last year that limits the Pentagon's power to make autonomous robots. Meanwhile, though, other DARPA operations like the PETMAN project, reported by RT earlier this week, suggest it's only a matter of time before the military has some form or another of weaponized robot warriors. Before we discuss the PETMAN, because we can go into that a little bit, but Okay, so obviously to somehow make all of this, DARPA doesn't always have to be really out in the open about this sort of thing, but they're dealing with some colleges that probably somehow they couldn't just keep it as secret as they usually like to. The technology in and of itself is interesting, and me as a person that supports the idea of transhumanism, I can't help but be a little bit excited about this. Because, here we go. Okay, yeah, we're going to use these nanowires to simulate, to emulate, the neural pathways in the brain and how all the synapses connect to the brain and everything. And so, one can take this story at its pure technological value and say, oh, good. Okay, so we're that much closer to emulating how the human brain works, and that maybe I could finally download all my memory engrams from my brain into a brain like that, and then that automatically works with now granted, there's no talk of the technology of how do you download a person's memory, or how do you download a brain into another one, but all the same, here, this can be just very exciting. But then you get to the end of it, and I mean, granted, the RT was cherry picking quotes, no doubt about it, but the quotes are there all the same. And that's with Irwin that says, "It is not clear, however, that the Pentagon is ready to adopt this technology for weapon systems." Now, it's the Department of Defense that's paying for, or that's getting the money funded here, that's channeling all this money. What else would it's the Department of Defense, what else are they going to want it for other than weapons? Really, I mean, that's nice that some scientists can say, well, no, they're not ready to use this in weapons or whatever, or maybe they never will. But that doesn't even make sense. You take a case like the internet, probably the greatest human invention ever. And the only thing I'll ever give the United States credit for coming up with. How did something as amazing as the internet, with all that communication capability and all that data capability and all that media capability and everything, how did the government let such an incredible thing loose? Because they couldn't really figure out how to use it for the military, so they just kind of let it go. They invented it, and they invented it with military purposes in mind. But then they just kind of said, well, all right, we can't do a whole lot with this. And then it went out to the public sector, or to the private sector. And the private sector said, oh, we know what to do with this. This is cool. And of course, it was peaceful means. And that's kind of the point, is that the private sector, granted, yes, there's companies who make billions off of government military contracts. But my point is that the private sector is not looking, by and large, for a war. And they're not looking to fund, a military or anything like that. They're looking to fill their own pockets. And if they can, get people to use a service that they want to provide, they'll do so. And that's great. And so, so you take the internet, you let that loose on the private sector and look at what happens. Maybe the greatest force for peace ever, the internet, once it gets wrung from the hands, or really they let it loose, of the military, the Department of Defense, because they just couldn't figure out what to do with it. Now, I can only hope that DARPA and the DoD will say, yeah, we can't use this technology, in any kind of military, in any weaponized sense. So, okay, private sector, here you go. Here, HP, go ahead and we've got this like neural brain, simulated, system that you can, do what you want, whatever. You give us 20 million or 20 billion probably, and we'll be happy, and you can do whatever you want with it. And then the private sector creates transhumanist bodies, eons before the government could ever dream of doing such a thing. I mean, that's kind of a best case scenario. But for just real quick, let's talk about the article mentioned PETMAN. Okay. And it said that Well, you see, the DoD, they can't actually use autonomous robots, meaning they can't use robots that aren't under human control. They can't use robots that think for themselves, which would seem antithetical to the point of the, of this attempt at creating a physical intelligence that DARPA is doing. Because the point of it, in fact, that is specifically stated, was that they wanted something that could be creative. They put it in fancy words. But that was the point, is that they wanted a mechanical brain, essentially, that could, or an electronic brain that could be creative. So, but apparently by law, they can't do that. Would that ever stop them? Probably not. Anyway, but let's just take a quick, this is another article from the RT just a few days before the other one. And this is about PETMAN. Pentagon's DARPA reveals their most human-like robot yet. The Pentagon's army of space-age robot warriors is getting a lot more real. The Defense Advanced Research Project, DARPA, has released video footage of a project that's been long in the works and really starting to now take shape. The Protection Ensemble Test Mannequin, or PETMAN for short, is the subject of the latest clip and very well could be all it takes to scare off any insurgents once it's ready for the battlefield. PETMAN is a bipedal robot that has been displayed during previous tests as having the ability to climb stairs and even do push-ups. In the latest video, though, the experimental project is showcased as being more lifelike than ever before. And if you go to the show notes, sovereigntech.com, or at SoundCloud page, soundcloud.com/sovereigntech, you can check out the video here. I'll have both links for these stories in the show notes. Scientists at Boston Dynamics have released a video that shows PETMAN clothed head to toe in full-on camouflage, jogging in place on a laboratory platform. But unlike earlier videos in which PETMAN appeared to be nothing more than a pile of wires enclosed in metal, the newest footage shows the science project at its all-time most humanness. And it when you watch this, it's looking pretty natural. And this is a robot, stronger than a human, theoretically faster than a human. PETMAN has sensors embedded in its skin that detect any chemicals leaking through the suit. The skin also maintains a microclimate inside the clothing by sweating and regulating temperature. Natural, agile movement is essential for PETMAN to simulate how a soldier stresses protective clothing under realistic conditions. That's why they dressed it up. The robot will have the shape and size of a standard human, making it the first anthropomorphic robot that moves dynamically like a real person. Okay, so here we go. We are simulating the human body with a robot, and we're simulating a human brain. And, the military talk aside, war talk aside, that these are going to be used for weapons, obviously that's disgusting. To think, that just makes it 10 times worse. War is something to be avoided because it's something that doesn't, well, there's a million reasons for it to be avoided, a million ethical reasons, of course. Hopefully war will one day go the way of the dodo, and, just be completely out of fashion. But to take humans, I'm scared of what people with a lack of conscience would do with an army of robots. Okay, I think that's pretty obvious. But that out of the way, let's talk the bigger picture. So we have this human body, this human replica body. Not that that's required for the point I'm about to make. The more important thing is the brain that DARPA is developing. This electronic brain. And they're developing it with the idea for it to be creative. And I'm about to make a comment. It's something I actually said on Pork Therapy a while back when I was a guest on that show. That's of course the show run by and hosted by the lovely and hyper intelligent Stephanie Murphy, who's the producer of this show. And the point is that let's say you could talk, or however you interfaced with this electronic brain that DARPA is developing. And if you ask the question, hi, electronic brain, what would you like to do today? Or what do you want? And if it gave an answer that was not a part of its specific programming, Okay, because creative programming only goes so far. It still has like specific parameters within which that can work. But if it gave an answer that existed outside of those parameters, I think some serious questions need to be asked on whether or not that's life. As whether or not, that's a new life form that we're encountering. And that clearly it would be intelligent. I mean, intelligent in the sense that, we uploaded, probably an encyclopedia. It probably has access to all of Wikipedia, so it knows far more than any human can, as far as like having access to raw data. And at the same time, if suddenly it has its own desires, or what happens, how about this? What happens if one of these machines, let's say they go, let's say they go all the way. They have the PETMAN, the robot body, and they throw in one of these creative electronic brains. And one of those machines gets told, okay, I need you to go sniper, this guy over in Uzbekistan or something. And it says no. What do you do with that? I think there's too many people who just want to say, it's a machine. Who cares? It's defective. Turn it off. And yes, kind of what I'm saying has been the plot for many a sci-fi story. I, Robot being a very famous one by Isaac Asimov. There's also an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called Measure of a Man, where they question Commander Data, who is an android. They question his humanity, or is he a life form, or is he just property? Is he just a thing? But I got to say, if we're getting this close, and granted, DARPA likes to exaggerate a lot. I know, I've dealt with them. If we're getting this close, these are some ethical questions I think that could at least be intriguing to start asking, but they may become very, very important. And again, if one of these brains expresses its own wants and its own desires outside of the parameters of its creativity, maybe we should start talking about what exactly that means. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more Sovryn Tech. Are you tired of people wasting away all their precious time? Then stop using the same social media as them. Google Plus is a centralized hub for all of your Google services, your ideas, and your passions. Google Plus has a much more international user base, as to where other forms of social media center around so-called developed nations that really don't do anything exciting in the first place. Google Plus has almost no spam, and has very few cat pictures, pictures of police, or anything else government-related. Stop using Facebook. You have an alternative. Start using Google Plus today.
Tech Roulette. Want to play?
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get sent to me from listeners and fans. Some people actually describe themselves as fans in the emails they sent me, and that's very, very nice. Thank you. It's always nice to have fans. And I pretty much, I have tons of these. Keep sending them. Please keep sending them. You can send them to the email sovereigntech@hush.ai. Just keep them coming. And I do, like I say, I do get a lot, and so I kind of just do an eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or unless I feel like the show is taking on a certain theme, as in like, there's a certain gist of everything going on in the show, it all has a similar topic or something, then I'll be a little more specific in what I choose. But by and large, it's just eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So if I don't get to your story right away, if it takes months, it's nothing personal. It's no offense. It's just the simple fact that, I have to choose one, and I have many to choose from, and I love it. That's so great. It's a wonderful problem to have, is what story from my listeners do I choose? And this one's relatively recent, from March 27th, 2013. And it's from Discovery, as in the Discovery Channel. And it's First Love Child of Human, Neanderthal Found. What is that saying? This is by Jennifer Vegas. That they, well, from the title, it seems that they found a baby that is a hybrid between a human and a Neanderthal. Interesting point. The word it's not actually Neanderthal. The pronunciation of that word is actually Neanderthal. It's TH, but it's Neanderthal. I think it's like a German word or something. But anyway, I am well aware that it is Neanderthal. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Let's read into the story. The skeletal remains of an individual being in northern Italy 40,000 to 30,000 years ago are believed to be that of a human/Neanderthal hybrid, according to a paper in PLOS 1. If further analysis proves the theory correct, the remains belonged to the first known such hybrid, providing direct evidence that humans and Neanderthals interbred. Prior genetic research determined the DNA of people with European and Asian ancestry is 1 to 4% Neanderthal. That's interesting. So they're saying genetic research determined that a lot of people, of those two areas of European and Asian ancestry have some Neanderthal DNA. The present study focuses on the individual's jaw, which was unearthed at a rock shelter called Riparo de Mazzena in the Monte Lascini region of Italy. Both Neanderthals and modern humans inhabited Europe at the same time. From the morphology of the lower jaw, the face of the Mazzena individual would have looked somehow intermediate between classic Neanderthals, who had a rather receding lower jaw, no chin, and the modern humans, who present a projecting lower jaw with a strongly developed chin. Co-author Silvana Condimi, an anthropologist, told Discovery News. Condimi is the CNRS research director at the University of Marseille. She and her colleagues studied the remains via DNA analysis and 3D imaging. They then compared those results with the same features from Homo sapiens. The genetic analysis shows that the individual's mitochondrial DNA is Neanderthal. Since this DNA is transmitted from a mother to her child, the researchers concluded that it was a female Neanderthal who mated with male Homo sapiens. By the time modern humans arrived in the area, the Neanderthals had already established their own culture, Mousterian, which lasted some 200,000 years. Numerous flint tools such as axes and spear points have been associated with the Mousterian. The artifacts are typically found in rock shelters such as the Riparo de Mazzena and caves throughout Europe. The researchers found that although the hybridization between the two hominid species likely took place, the Neanderthals continued to uphold their own cultural traditions. That's an intriguing clue because it suggests that two populations did not simply meet, mate, and merge into a single group. As Condemi and her colleagues wrote, the mandible supports the theory of a slow process of replacement of Neanderthals by the invading modern human populations, as well as additional evidence of the upholding of the Neanderthals' cultural identity. Prior fossil finds indicate that modern humans were living in a southern Italy cave as early as 45,000 years ago. Modern humans and Neanderthals therefore lived in roughly the same regions for thousands of years, but the new human arrivals from the Neanderthal perspective might not have been welcome, and for good reason. The research team hints that the modern humans may have raped female Neanderthals, bringing to mind modern cases of ethnic cleansing. Ian Tattersall is one of the world's leading experts on Neanderthals and the human fossil record. He is a paleoanthropologist and a curator emeritus at the American Museum of Natural History. Tattersall told Discovery News that the hypothesis presented in the newspaper is very intriguing and one that invites more research. Neanderthal culture and purebred Neanderthals all died out 35,000 to 30,000 years ago. Okay. yeah, I mean, the idea that there was rape is shocking. If we're dealing with primitive peoples, it's, I have a hard time, like they're trying to compare it to ethnic cleansing. I have a hard time thinking that they would do that. I mean, maybe it's that simple where pan sapiens, which by the way, I'm not a huge fan of the word homo sapien. Okay. It comes from homo erectus, homo, meaning man, and sapien meaning knowing. So it means knowing man, meaning intelligent man. So that's kind of like the difference. That's the Latin for homo sapien. But I think there's a lot of people who have proposed other words, some even more modern, claiming that we're even different from homo sapien. But there's some people who have claimed that there should be other classifications, other species and genii that describe humanity. And I think pan sapien is more accurate. Pan just means ape. And as we are descended from apes, which I consider not theory, but scientific fact. I mean, it's nice that they call it the theory of evolution, but I think, most scientists would agree, look, it's not a theory anymore. Anyway, especially with stories like this, where we're having love children between different species of hominids. So anyway, I like the term pansapien. So in the future with the show, if you ever hear me say the word pansapien, obviously when I'm reading from the article, I'm going to read how the article says it. But generally, I use the term pansapien just because I think it's a little more accurate and it's not so anthropocentric as to where, humans are so damn special that they deserve their own class. They're apes. Deal with it. Albeit intelligent ones, they are apes. So anyway, pansapiens, going for a program of ethnic cleansing with the Neanderthals, I do find that kind of hard to believe. I don't find the raping hard to believe, but I do find the idea of ethnic cleansing to be kind of crazy. I mean, humans naturally are empathetic. And so, I would kind of hope that especially at that early stage, and especially in areas like Italy, where unlike, say they were coming up, that pansapiens were coming up from Africa, when they'd come into Europe, they were literally entering, for lack of a better phrase, a land of milk and honey. Okay. And because there wouldn't be that scarcity that would have existed most likely in the areas of Africa that they started to develop, I would imagine that they would become far more peaceful. Now, that's purely theoretical, but hey, one paleoanthropologist can guess, so can I. Not that I'm an officially recognized paleoanthropologist. But I would think that there was plenty, and I would think that actually, that to say that somehow that pansapiens were, raping Neanderthals, the fact that their cultures stayed distinct, which this article clearly states, would lend me to believe that wasn't so much happening. That there wasn't like a war, that there was more maybe a mutual respect. I mean, that again, all theoretical. So, but that's very, very fascinating that they were, the Neanderthals and pansapiens were mating, apparently. There's a third species of human that come down from Pan erectus, the progenitor of modern hominids, called Denisovans, that they just found out about in 2007. Keep that in mind, that these, I mean, we know so little, in particular, past what's called the wall of history, which is essentially any time before recorded history, which is essentially, any time after like 10,000 BCE. There's so little known, I mean, that we're still finding evidence of other bipedal, essentially different types of humans. And one of those is the Denisovans. And now there's similar claims being made of Denisovans that, that they were mating with pansapiens. And I find it's interesting. Now, let's go back to the Neanderthal quick. There's the chances that now Neanderthals supposedly, due to their brain cavities, that they had larger brains. That they may have been, and now does that make one essentially smarter per se? No, maybe not. Technically blue whales have larger brains than we do. That doesn't mean they're smarter than we are, but they may be very intelligent. We don't know. So Neanderthals could have been a lot smarter than we are. Why didn't they become the dominant species? Why did Pansapiens end up taking over, essentially, like this article is claiming? And one of the theories on that is that Neanderthals, they couldn't, their abilities for speech were limited. Their abilities to communicate were limited because like their larynx was higher or something to that effect, if I remember correctly. If I'm wrong about that, you can contact me at sovryntech@hush.ai or at sovryntech.com. There's a way to immediately post to me on there and correct me. But if I'm not mistaken, yeah, there were some kind of deficiencies in the ability to communicate for Neanderthals. And so that's really it, is that even if they were more intelligent, they couldn't express that intelligence in ways as well as Pansapiens could. So, and I wonder if that somehow lent itself to, and I hate that because that leads kind of, I guess, to the idea of the ethnic cleansing, in that somehow Pansapiens were maybe slightly superior, or at least superior in speech ability, and thus they could outmaneuver, or not necessarily outsmart, but for lack of a better word, outsmart Neanderthals, and that's how they became the big deal. What do you make of this? If you have comments on this, email me and let me know. Is this kind of hot? That, it almost makes you think like, okay, wow, what would it be like to have sex with an alien? Well, this is kind of that sort of situation, I guess. Were there, in this land of plenty that Italy certainly would be, what was it like back then? There's a movie, I think it's called The Quest for Fire, and it's all about cave people. And it's interesting because in that, and it doesn't get parlayed as rape. Of course, it's under the director's vision and the writer. It's a movie that depicts caveman, depicts them pretty, I want to say, maybe not accurately, but it has fidelity. And in that fidelity, it allows for, they don't talk really, it's not all grunts, but they don't talk much. And in that, there's a point where a guy will just, get behind a male caveman will just get behind a woman, and there'll be like what appears to be a very short mating ritual. And then he'll just, start fucking her from behind. And, I don't think that comes off as rape, but anyway, but it's interesting. How exactly, was it, again, I guess to say that maybe this was rape isn't unfair, because how exactly did you communicate to the Neanderthal, hey, baby, I think I love you, but what am I so afraid of? You know what I mean? and it's not funny. If it's rape, it's not funny at all, but the way I expressed it, I guess, kind of was. So, it raises huge questions. And, it's interesting, too. Recently, there's been a story. I don't know that I did it in that episode of Sovryn Tech. I think it's been done on some other shows, though. But there was a story that a scientist, I think in the UK, said, hey, if there's a woman out there willing, we can, I can essentially make the embryo in her of a Neanderthal. And we could have a modern day Neanderthal. And that's just a mess to even think about doing. To reintroduce a species that died off for who knows what reasons, a million unknown reasons. I don't think that's a good idea, especially if it's just one for a creature that alone. To have no one else to relate to, and to even have the problem. I guess they could also genetically alter it so that it could talk better, much like, Pansapiens do, like we do. Maybe that'd be better, because then it could communicate, but then what's the point? I don't know. It just, the idea is just, I'm not talking about humans shouldn't play God. I mean, there is no God, so we might as well be it. But my point is that that's a very, very dangerous thing to do, is to introduce something like that, something that's been gone for thousands of years, maybe 30, 35,000 years. Reintroduce that into the ecosystem, not a great idea, in my opinion. So, but this is interesting. I mean, hybrid babies, our biological ancestors our evolutionary ancestors were getting it on. I hope it wasn't rape. I really do. I imagine there was cases of that, just as there are still cases of that between pansapiens, between humans. But that's pretty interesting. And I wonder, and then that raises the questions, were these hybrids very intelligent? Because they could have the larger brain mass, but then perhaps have the speech patterns and speech ability of pansapiens. Fascinating stuff to consider. And someone should really, I would love to read a great novel, written about something like this. In fact, I'm almost tempted to write it myself. In fact, little secret, I have a DBA for a business called Paleo Erotica. Do with that what you will. Okay, a little bit of a secret there that I'm letting out, but anyway, it's something I've actually owned for a little over a year, and I haven't done anything with it yet. But hey, here it is. This could be Paleo Erotica. The stories are absolutely endless. And you say to yourself, well, what if they didn't talk much? Then can that make an intriguing story? Oh, you bet it can. If you ever read the original Arthur C. Clarke's the book, not the movie. The movie is completely different. But if you read the book of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the first section of the book is all about this caveman, this ape, essentially intelligent, this slightly more intelligent ape, and I think his name's like Moonstar or something like that, and it's all about him becoming intelligent, and it is a riveting read. It's better than the rest of the book. It's so good. So it can be done. Anyway, Neanderthal Lovechild. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Are you ready?
I've never seen anyone so treated like a god in my life.
Brian Sovryn as guest co-host tomorrow night, and so that should be a good show.
On that note,
we just added Brian Sovryn.
Okay, we haven't.
Oh, is he good?
He's been in the audience.
He's certainly got opinions on things. Yes.
I'm so close to being like God. No one is above me. Okay, absolutely no one. I don't take orders from anybody, and that's how much closer to God can you get?
Is there anything he doesn't do better than everyone else?
Oh, that's just his way of talking. He's one of the best.
Break it down!
Catch Sovryn Tech, the show about technology and how it can set you free with me, Brian Sovryn. That's Sovryn at SoundCloud.com/Sovryn Tech.
Think you can tell me what to do?
Wow. Oh. It's a website of the week.
It is time for Website of the Week, and this week got a pretty cool site here. This is Mox, that's MOX.TV. And I really... one thing, this is interesting. There's recently been news reports coming out that Fox and I think CBS, now this is Mox, but I'm talking about Fox as in, Fox and Fox News, all that, that Fox and CBS are saying, look, we're just going to go to a subscription only service where this whole network television thing just isn't working, and we're going to get away from it. because nobody's really watching TV anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't watching television shows, because they still are. I mean, obviously everybody, or except me, watches Game of Thrones. And, you know, so there's definitely this whole push, this whole thing for, you know, online kind of television. And, you know, while I wish people would get away from television in general, if you are going to watch TV, I mean, this is something that's kind of cool. What this is, Mox.tv, it's in beta right now, but it's actually, it's all electronic and drum and bass and dance music and all this stuff. And it's from like various, you know, they're showing either music videos, or actually right now they're showing kind of a festival, an electronic festival, Miami 13. You know, they show stuff from Spain, all over the world, and just 24/7. There's these great, you know, there's just this great music playing all the time, and you get to watch the DJ do this whole thing. And so if you just like having, you know, electronic music, trance music, whatever, you know, I'm like, I've even seen BT on here, Brian Trance. I'm a huge fan of BT. That guy is one of the greatest musicians in history. That's just how it is. And I mean, it's just always running. It's always on. It's really professional. It's not some kind of pirate website either. Not that that's a problem. That'd be fine if it was. You know, it's totally official, and it's in beta. They're probably just trying to see how many people are actually going to use it. But it's running all the time. You can connect to all your social media with it, and it's just great music, constantly great music. And it's not stuff that gets, you know, this isn't radio play stuff. This is the real deal. You know, there's a lot of people. I mean, I like electronic music. I mean, I guess I love it, in a lot of ways, but you know, you always get like those niche people where, you know, you gotta, you know, well, if you don't know this group, or if you don't know this DJ or something, you don't know anything about the music or whatever. This definitely will appeal to that kind of person too, because the rarest of the rare gets played here. As well as some of the more popular types. Like I say, BT's kind of popular, even though I don't think he's like that mainstream. I've never heard BT really played on the radio, at least not in the past 15 years. But it's all here for you. They even, if you're like a fan of mashup, which is a very popular style of music, where they take, mashup is where you take, you know, all different, you know, you take a bunch of different songs by other people, and then you literally mash them together, you know, and that's amazing stuff. But yeah, you can go to mox.tv, and you can check it out and watch it all day long, and just, you know, rock out with your cock out, let it go. You know what I mean? It's great stuff. So mox.tv, if you like electronic music, all the different genres of it, go for it. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be back with more.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
People stick some pretty bizarre things in their urethra as part of masturbation or sexual curiosity. Occasionally, they lose their grip on the object, and kaboom, there it goes straight into the bladder. Now, the things that urologists have pulled out of people's bladders ranges from pens, pencils, pins, Allen wrenches, and toothbrushes to marbles, thermometers, vegetables, glue, and hot wax. Now, 3 of the more recent medical accounts that I've read about of things that men have shoved down their pee holes that ended up in their bladders included: 1, a telephone cable; 2, a man managed to stick 2 AAA batteries down his penis and they lodged into his bladder; and finally, a very unlucky 22-year-old stuck a string of 29 highly magnetized metal balls into his penis, which slipped into his bladder, and there they clumped together due to their strong magnetism. Complicating matters is the fact that the extraction tools that the physicians had to stick into the man's urethra to get into his bladder were all metal, and so the entire group of magnetic balls would clump tightly around the tool, making it nearly impossible to pull out the individual balls. Please do not stick things into your urethra and down your penis.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
It is time for listener emails on Sovereign Tech, where the emails you send me, I will go over them on the show. Sometimes if you want, in fact, you can specify. If you want, I will answer your email right away if I have the chance. I do get a lot of emails, and that's great. Please keep them coming, baby. But if you want like a quick answer, I'll answer it right away, and then I'll deal with it. I'll just rehash it on the show later. But other times, I'll just wait till, I go to bring it to the show, like especially if I'm going to be doing it within, a few days. I'll just do, I'll do the question then, and I won't directly answer it. So if I don't answer you, don't think that I'm not going to get to it. I will get to it. It just, maybe I didn't deem it as needing an answer right away. Or again, if you ask for an answer right away, I'll try and provide that for you if I can. And this is an email. Of course, also, I will keep you anonymous unless you wish, and you'll have to specify, saying I want to be mentioned by name. Otherwise, I won't be, I'll keep you completely anonymous. And, well, I might mention a him or her. I'll try not to do that, but, sometimes that's a little difficult to not do. Anyway, so this email actually has a title, which is great, and it's to delete or not to delete. That is my question. And the emailer says, I'm seriously considering deleting my Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus accounts. Here are just a few reasons why. When paid attention to, social media are time sinks that suck up your time with very little return for that investment, quote unquote. As it is, I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I primarily post to social media to spread messages, articles, or news, accounts of items I believe would be of interest to the liberty-minded or that may ignite the spark of liberty in the minds of statists on my varied lists. Let's see, another one. Potential employers and the state will use the information on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus against me, if it ever came to that. Another, while social media enables some form of contact among people, in my opinion, in many cases, they've replaced genuine human contact for virtual interaction in which I have no interest. A lot of this is capitalized too, saying, look, I have no interest in that. Meaning in virtual interaction. I just thought I'd ask your opinion, care to weigh in. And yeah, I care to weigh in. Thanks for asking. Let's break them down. And the first point is that, social media are time sinks that suck up your time with very little return for that investment. By and large, I agree. That doesn't mean I use social media. I particularly use Google Plus. I do use Twitter as well. And, for like really quick updates, I'll use Twitter. And it's interesting, people have broken up the different social media, at least the big three, Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus, and maybe LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is mainly for jobs. You know what that's for. They've broken up, social media into what they're supposed to be for. Like Facebook is to connect with people. Twitter is not to connect with people, but to kind of like follow, say, celebrities, or maybe to make yourself a celebrity or something. Interestingly, your amount of Twitter followers is now an important thing on CVs, on resumes that I've learned recently. And Google Plus is supposed to be for your passions. I disagree with the last point about the first two. I think are fair to say. The idea that Google Plus is just for your passions, I totally disagree. Google Plus, in my opinion, is the hybrid of the two. It's kind of the penultimate social media platform. So, but do they suck up time? Yeah, I say this a lot. I say it on Free Talk Live when I'm co-hosting on Sunday nights. I say it in all kinds of areas. I've even talked about it on the show in the past on Sovereign Tech, where it seems there's so many people who just like say, and I've done this too, it's happened to me, where, you're going through Facebook and suddenly 3 hours have passed. And you go, what was I doing? And you're just like looking at and you're just sitting there staring at the screen, And especially if you're not so much interacting and you're just like trying to find info and stuff like that. What are you getting out of that? I don't know, and not that the purpose in life is to be productive. I think the purpose in life is to be happy. But boy, if you are wanting to be productive, it can kill your productivity. No doubt about it. And I've heard that from, many anecdotal cases from people. And you're talking about how you share things to the liberty-minded, or you're hoping to inspire, to ignite the spark of liberty in someone else. There's actually a meme on Facebook going around, one of those e-card memes that says, "Oh, let me change my mind about politics because of what you just posted, said no one ever." And I think that's pretty accurate. That's not to say you're wasting your time. I think it's good. You're trying to spread liberty. There's various ways to do that. This is one of them. But just on my own thoughts on it, I don't think it works. I don't think it changes anybody's mind. That you bring some like realization to them. Like, I love the Velociraptor memes. I think those are hilarious, but I just can't picture somebody, I have some friends who are, I guess you'd call them liberal, and they'll just, anytime I would point something out like that to them, some like really amazing, short, quick point, they'd come up with some answer to denounce it. People have to kind of take their own path. I don't think you can really guide them. You know what I mean? I don't see that. So to do that, I don't really see the point. And in fact, I'm rather annoyed. Granted, I'm friends with a lot of liberty people, and I'm absolutely annoyed at the amount of like police pictures. I'm annoyed at all the pictures of the drones, because if Facebook is to connect with people, then let me connect with you. I know about the government. Please stop. And the same goes for other people. If you really want to convince people, if you really want to quote unquote convert people, just show them how, I know this is cheesy to say, but really show them how cool you are. Show them how awesome you are. Don't try to convince them about like, oh, see, Obama did this and so did Bush. That's not going to get you anywhere. So posting that kind of crap on Facebook, I think is meaningless, and frankly, it's almost annoying. But then I surround myself with liberty media, so maybe I'm a little more sensitive to it. The second point: potential employers and the state will use the information available on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus against you. This is true, and I have a kind of a lot to say on that. In that, the reason they can use it against you is because we are culturally forced with social conservatism. And the fear of social conservatism, I understand, and I don't know what industry this emailer's in, to where, they're worried that this would be a problem if they, saw some kind of crazy thing they said online or whatever. But my opinion, a form of activism that you can do is to just let it loose and just let it all out there and say, yeah, that's me, because it feels like the concern that like you said, like the email said, employers and the state's got to, we have to not let the state hang this social conservatism over our heads. Okay. Now, I mean, okay. Yeah. They saw that I said that I smoked, I was smoking marijuana last night or whatever, and that's illegal and all that stuff. All the same, we need to let our wild sides go. We need to make it public. Well, you don't need to. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I think that's a big problem. Okay, is that the state controls people, and employers are wrapped up in that, control people based on this social conservatism. It has to go if we're ever going to be really, really free. So that's something to contemplate as far as that goes, because that's, in my opinion, that's a system of control. And if you want a private life, there's nothing wrong with that. Definitely go for that private life. And in that case, if you want that private life, then yes, delete these accounts. Okay, while social media enables some form of contact among people, in my opinion, in many cases, they replace genuine human contact for virtual interaction in which you have no interest. Yeah. This is all personal taste. There's people, I have friends, all over the world, and this is the only way I can talk to them. I hate Skype. I don't hate, but I'm glad Skype exists, so I don't hate it. But I am very, I know what you mean. It's a kind of contact that I just don't like because it's not real, whatever that means, quote unquote real. And so I can totally understand that. However, the thing I have had to come to terms with even very recently is that it's the only form of communication that's possible, and it's 10 times better than talking on the phone. Because I don't like talking on the phone either. I want to connect with people, like really connect. But you have to use what you have. Now, are these methods of, what's the real point of connection? The real point of connection maybe for some is to find a romantic partner. And are these good ways to do that? My opinion, no. They're just not. The best thing you can do is like maybe move somewhere, where there's like a liberty community already, and then you can meet people inside of that or something to that nature. Like you take your pick of which one of those. But I don't see these things like, I guess people have met people through OkCupid, but as many times as there have been successes, I think there's been twice as many fails, if not more. So I don't see it as a great way to connect. I don't see the internet as a great way to connect anymore. It used to be like in the 90s. I don't see it as a great way to connect with people, perhaps if you're looking for those romantic partnerships or something. So it is ultimately a decision up to the emailer, to delete those or not to delete them. Maybe don't delete them, but just don't touch them for a couple weeks and see if your life has somehow improved. You know what I mean? And that may be the best thing is to test for yourself, because everybody's different, I don't mean this. I mean this really in the nicest way. But and I know the emailer's not asking this, but I'm just putting this point out there that I imagine Stephen Hawking loves Facebook. I mean that in a very nice way. Because that's a way that he can connect with tons of people and that he can do, without the need for speech. An interesting point that I want to bring up in light of this is that Lifehacker recently did a poll on their website as to, and this is just barely a week ago, what is your social network of choice? And the statistics on this are shocking. Because guess what's number one? No, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. All right, guess what's number two? No, you're wrong. You're wrong. Guess what's higher than both number 2 and number 3? Combined, Google Plus. Number 1 is Google Plus at 60.15% of the votes. It was some odd 14,000 votes for Google Plus. Facebook and Twitter. Facebook had 15%. Twitter had essentially 12%, with a total of 6,000 votes, almost 7,000 votes. Literally double the amount of people voted for Google Plus, and over half, 60%. Said Google Plus was their social network of choice. So you have to ask yourself, now, that's what everybody says is, nobody uses Google Plus. Well, that's because you're not using it. Maybe if you started, everybody would eventually. Clearly, there's 60% of the world out there. Anyway, great email. I'll be right back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Got an energy spike. Launch.
In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched. Return fire. Well, freeze them!
Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Software That Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover a piece of software that actually sometimes some of these pieces of software I cover are ones that people email me, say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And if I think it's pretty good, either I probably won't even do it for listener email. I have so many of those to go through and keep them coming. And what I'll do is, you email me at sovereigntech@hush.ai, and then I'll just do them for Software of the Week or Website of the Week or something when I find that it's actually, a really noteworthy thing. This one isn't from that. This is one I found on my own when I was trying to find, because I post Sovereign Tech. I do post it on YouTube. There is a YouTube channel for Sovereign Tech, and you can, you can listen to the episodes on there. There is video. It's just a bunch of pictures. It's like all the memes that I've made for Sovereign Tech, and there's a lot of them. And those are like interesting pictures that I've found that just run through. So there's not like a whole lot to watch per se, but you can listen to the shows on YouTube. And I needed a Linux solution that makes it very, very easy to make picture slideshow YouTube videos with my own audio in it. That being, that audio being, of course, like what you're listening to right now. And so I needed one for Linux, and what I found was it's called OpenShot Video Editor. It's at openshot.org, and it's actually in the middle. It's in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign, and this is going to be, right now it really only works for Linux, but this is going to be cross-platform, as in it's going to work for, eventually with the Kickstarter campaign, they plan on it being released for Mac OS, for OS X and for Windows. But right now it does just work for Linux. It's at like version 1.4, and it's great. It's pretty much exactly what I was looking for. Very simple, not very simple. One could argue that outside of Ubuntu, there's nothing really simple in Linux, but it looks like, it doesn't look, it's not command line, it has a very, very nice presentation, a great GUI, graphic interface, had all the features I was looking for. And again, it really was easy to use. I'm just going to say that. I mean, granted, because I'm not big on video, and I don't do a whole lot, like I don't do video editing. I've never really done video editing. I don't bother with any of that stuff. And so, if it had a steep learning curve, I probably would have ran away from it, because I just don't have, I'm not that interested in video to really know. But it was simple. It did exactly what I wanted by comparison, to something like Windows Movie Maker, which I am familiar with over the years. I thought it was, well, granted, it's not at that level of simplicity. I thought that OpenShot had a lot more to offer than Windows Movie Maker, but I thought it was definitely easy enough. As far as Linux goes, it's easily the easiest. It's easily the easiest thing to use, as far as video production on Linux. And that's kind of a rare thing on Linux. There's some good programs out there, but a lot of them are very, very complex, as to where this was just, again, it had all the features I was looking for, and it was relatively simple. And the nice thing with anything that's out on Linux is you have a great community of people online that when you Google something, all right, how do I do that in this program, or how do I do that on this version of Linux? And there's always a great community online to mine knowledge from. So that's nice too. In fact, it's even better than on any other OS, in my opinion. So OpenShot Video Editor, check it out, especially if you're a Linux user and you need to do some video editing. I thought it was great. So this is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Sovryn! Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk. I love that music. That's Bit Shifter from his album Information Chase. Check it out if you haven't. You can find it online and you can purchase his stuff. Really, really good. Well, actually, he offers it for free, but if you want to purchase it, not a bad idea at all. Game Talk, again, probably one of my favorite sections of the show. This week we have a story from Kotaku, which I love to get stories from. It's just a great video game blog. And this is from Cliff Brzezinski, and it's called Nickels, Dimes, and Quarters. The video game industry is just that, an industry, which means it exists in a capitalistic world. A free market, a place where you're welcome to spend your money or whatever you please, or to refrain from spending that money. Now, obviously, we're not in a truly free market. I don't expect, the writer for Kotaku to understand that, but his point's kind of the same, that, we can kind of vote with our dollars to some degree, at least, especially in the electronic world. It's a lot easier to do. Those companies that put these products out, they're for-profit businesses. They exist to produce, market, and ship great games, ultimately for one purpose. First, for money, then for acclaim. And when those companies are publicly traded on the stock market, they're forced to answer to their shareholders. This means that they need to make a lot of money in order to increase the value of the shareholders' stock every quarter. Adjusted for inflation, your average video game is actually cheaper than it has ever been. Never mind the ratio of the hours of joy you get from a game per dollar compared to film. Now, that's an interesting point. Excuse me. That's an interesting point, because you think how easy it is to make a DVD, because most games are on like DVDs or Blu-rays now. You think how easy it is to make that. Imagine what it had to cost per production to make a Nintendo cartridge, an NES cartridge back in the 80s. Anyway, okay. Adjusted for, so games are cheaper now than they really have ever been, if you include inflation and probably that factoid too about what it used to take to make cartridges. To produce a high quality game, it takes tens of millions of dollars, and when you add in marketing, that can get up to 100 plus million. In the AAA console market, you need to spend a ton of cash on television ads alone, never mind other marketing stunts, launch events, swag, and the hip marketing agency that costs a boatload in your attempts to go viral with something. AAA meaning kind of your Battlefields or your Call of Duty games or your BioShocks, these really big name games. Not only is the market more crowded than ever, but your average consumer has many more entertainment options than ever before in the history of humanity. Hell, when levels are loading in our games, my wife and I read Twitter and Reddit. So he's saying, look, you've got to keep my attention or I'm going to move on. Another factor to consider is the fact that many game development studios are in places like the San Francisco Bay Area, where the cost of living is extraordinarily high. Even Seattle's pretty pricey these days. Those talented artists, programmers, designers, and producers that spent their time building the game you love, they need to eat and feed their families, something that the hipster/boomerang kid generation seems to forget all too often. I've seen a lot of comments online about microtransactions. They're a dirty word lately, it seems. Gamers are upset that publishers or developers are nickel and diming them. They're raging at big and evil corporations who are clueless and trying to steal their money. Microtransactions meaning, this is really popular, especially on mobile platforms like Android or iOS, where you have to pay, to get that sword, you got to pay 99 cents when you already paid $10 for the game or something. I'm going to come right out and say it. The blogger goes, I'm tired of EA being seen as the bad guy, EA being the Electronic Arts. Admittedly, Electronic Arts won the award second year in a row for worst company in the world. But anyway, I think it's bullshit that EA has the scumbag EA memes on Reddit and that the good guy Valve can do no wrong. Valve being the creators of Steam and popular games like Half-Life. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Gabe and company, Gabe Newell being the head of Valve, and most everything they do. Remember, I bought that custom portal turret that took over the internet a while back, and I have friends over there. However, it blows my mind that somehow gamers don't seem to get that Valve is a business just like any other. And when Valve charges $100 for an engagement ring in Team Fortress 2, it's somehow cool, yet when EA wants to sell you something similar, it's seen as evil. Yes, guys, I hate to break it to you, as awesome as Valve is, they're also a company that seeks to make as much money as possible. They're just way better at their image control. So his point is that, okay, there's a game, Team Fortress 2, that's like really popular for selling items to you, like hats and all this other wild stuff. Why people are into it, I don't know. I don't play Team Fortress 2 that much. I love Steam and the things they make, but I don't understand that game that much. Anyway, and so they're saying, why will you buy a hat on Team Fortress 2, but then when, EA wants to charge you $2 for a car in Need for Speed, why are you complaining then? So it's a great point. Anyway, we'll keep going. Making money and running a business is not inherently evil. It creates jobs and growth and puts food on the table. This country was built on entrepreneurship, talking about the United States. Yes, there are obvious issues around basic business ethics and the need for a company to give back to its community. But that's not what this blog is about right now. People love to beat up on Origin. Origin is a competing platform to Steam. For a good amount of time, Steam sucked. No one looked at it seriously for the first while. Years ago, when Gabe pitched it at GDC to my former coworkers, they came back with eye rolls. Who's laughing now? All of Valve. It took Valve years to bang their service into the stellar shape that it is in these days. Yet somehow everyone online forgets this, and they give EA crap about trying to create their own online services. Heaven forbid they see our digital roadmap for the future and try to get on board with the games as services movement. I remember when the rage was pointed at Epic, which is another company, when we allowed users to purchase weapon skins in Gears 3. I replied to an enraged fan on Twitter that you're more than welcome to not buy the optional cosmetic weapon skins that will make you more visible to the enemy. And you know what? In spite of the uproar, people still bought plenty of them. I've seen the numbers. If you don't like EA, don't buy their games. If you don't like their microtransactions, don't spend money on them. It's that simple. EA has many smart people working for them, and they wouldn't attempt these things if they didn't work. Turns out they do. I assure you there are teams of analysts studying the numbers behind consumer behavior over there that are studying how you, the gamer, spends his hard-earned cash. If you're currently raging about this on GAF or on the IGM forums or on GameSpot, guess what? You're the vocal minority. Your average guy that buys just Madden and Grand Theft Auto every year doesn't know, nor does he care. He has no problem throwing a few bucks more at a game because, hey, why not? The market, as I have previously stated, is in such a sense of turmoil that the old business model is either evolving, growing, or dying. No one really knows. Free to play, aka free to spend $4,000 on it, is here to stay, like it or not. Everyone gets a Smurfberry. Every single developer out there is trying to solve the mystery of this new model. Every console game must have a steady stream of DLC because otherwise, guess what? It becomes traded in or it's just rented. In the console space, you need to do anything to make sure that the disc stays in the tray. I used to be offended by GameStop's business practices, but let's be honest. They're the next Tower Records or Sam Goody. It's only a matter of time, meaning that they're going to go away. I have to say, I'm just going to cut in here. I mean, the article goes on. You can read the rest of it. I do think, I understand his point. Yes, if a game company wants to charge whatever they're going to charge, go ahead. And especially for downloadable content, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when they used to do what were called expansion packs for like PC games, and you'd hash out another $20 for a $40 game, but it was almost like you were playing a whole other game. So the expansion packs were a little bit different. But I do have to say, in defense of all this, that when you do lay down money for a game, if you have to pay money, and this is where EA is the killer, if you have to pay in more to even beat the game, that falls out of line with what this guy's saying. So anyway, if you have thoughts on this, email me at sovereigntech@hush.ai. It's an interesting article. I'll be back with more.
Are you searching for a mouthwatering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find Georgia's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, Georgia's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for Georgia's famous baklava. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where we discuss perhaps what are the only heroes left. No, they're not the only heroes. But where we discuss people that I generally consider heroes, and those are hackers, be they black hat, gray hat, white hat. I think if they're considered black hat, often they have an image problem, you know, or it's the government claiming that there's something that they're not, whichever. So anyway, this is an interesting, this story got a lot of press. We're in April of 2013 right now, and in April of 2013, this story got a lot of press, including a rebuttal, which we'll talk about towards the end of it. This is from SlashGear, who I think may have been the first to bring this to print, or to, you know, not that they printed it out, but to put it online. And it's hacker demonstrates remote airplane hijacking using an Android phone. Whoa. I mean, if that title doesn't grab you, I don't know what does. I mean, because what is that saying? It's saying that, okay, this guy had an Android phone and he hacked an airplane remotely. like a 747. And he could control it. Anyway, the Hack in the Box security conference is taking place in Amsterdam this week, and one of the talks was fairly interesting. Hugo Tesso, who is a security professional as well as a licensed pilot, demonstrated how one could remotely hijack an airplane using nothing but an Android device as the tool. It turns out that two important aviation systems, the Automated Dependent Surveillance Broadcast and the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, are completely unencrypted and unauthenticated, allowing anyone with the right tools and a little know-how to access the system remotely without too much trouble. Teso simply hit up eBay for actual flight code software that's normally used for training pilots, as well as nabbing a radio transmitter. During the demonstration, Teso audited real aircraft code by searching for vulnerabilities on a fleet of virtual aircrafts using real airplanes. In this case would obviously be unethical and quite illegal, along with an Android app called Planesploit, which won't be hitting the Google Play Store. I think there's a link for it in this article. Obviously, this article will be in the show notes. You can go to sovryntech.com, or you can go to the SoundCloud page, soundcloud.com/sovryntech, and you can find it there. Teso was able to control the steering of a Boeing jet as long as the plane was in autopilot mode. Okay, so that's important to note. Teso has been working in the IT industry for 11 years now, and before that, he was trained and licensed commercial pilot for 12 years. His 23 years of combined experience with the two professions has led him to teach the public about the state of the security of aviation computer systems and communication protocols, which are actually not that secure, as Teso demonstrated. Okay, now there's been some rebuttal to this, in that now there's a you can actually watch part of the video from the Hack in the Box conference on the link that'll be in the show notes. And apparently he used, some of the rebuttals are this. One is that he used software, like airplane software, that doesn't actually get used by, well, at least most of the airports. Now, I mean, I assume if it's airplane software, that it's used somewhere because it was built. Maybe no one uses it anymore. Maybe it's antiquated or something. But I mean, we're talking about it. This is at a hacker conference, and the only people that are rebutting aren't the other hackers, which are the people that should actually know, hey, no, this is bullshit. You know what I mean? They should be able to just come right out and say, no, this isn't possible. But it's only the governments and like various, like airline companies that are doing the rebuttal. And so that's kind of scary. You know what I mean? Because, okay, so the people that are telling you not to be afraid are the people that kind of make it their job to make, to have you either be not afraid or, you know what I mean? So, I don't know that this has been disproven. Now, the fortunate thing is that this can only be apparently done while a plane is in autopilot mode. The unfortunate point to that is that planes are usually, when you're flying, probably 75% of the time they are in autopilot mode. And he said he can control the flight. It doesn't appear that, and I think there's a lot of like safeguard systems that exist in airplanes. I'm not an airline engineer, so I'm the wrong person to ask as far as that goes. But I think there's things that would at least keep somebody from shutting down an airplane entirely. You know what I mean? Because that would be terrible if somebody could just, with an Android phone and the right app, Planesploit in this case, could just turn the airplane off. Yeah, exactly. Scary. So, now the beauty of this is that this guy, people are saying, oh, I can't believe, and I've actually read some of the comments on various sites where people are saying, I can't believe this is terrible. We got to ban Android. Some people are saying we got to ban Android phones. Some people are like, oh, these hackers are terrible. No, look, good thing this guy figured it out before anybody else did that may actually have malintent. Good thing that he did talk about it at Hack in the Box at these conferences. People think, and I've seen that too, because I've gone to some what they call Hope conferences. That's 2600 magazine, which I talk about often on the show. They essentially set up a conference or a convention every year in New York City called Hope, and it'll have various, like the Next Hope, the Last Hope, or something like that. It's like Hackers on Planet Earth is what Hope means, or Hackers of Planet Earth. And people have like these negative, they think everybody's just going into these buildings and like figuring out how to take over the world or something. And no, that's not it at all. They're figuring these things out. Hackers want things to be as secure as you do. Do you get what I'm saying? Hackers don't want airplanes to be able to be controlled from their Android phone. Hackers want these loopholes filled, solved, canceled. They want this stuff. They want security as much as you do. That's the whole point, is they want their privacy, which is a very big driving force in the hacker community, is they want privacy. Okay, so they're not pointing these things out to you so that they can mess with you. They're pointing it out because they want real security. They want the same thing you want. They're not just like you, but they're human just like you. They have very similar needs. Do you see my point? I mean, I think, and like I said, I saw the comments where people were freaking out, just saying, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Anonymous is going to start crashing airplanes. No, they're not. They have no interest in that. Okay? Now, despite that, I mean, to get to the other point of the story, I find it positively fascinating that Android phones, and I'm not sure which Android phone he was using, but I mean, they're by and large, most of them now have dual cores in them, and they're all relatively the same. They're all very high powered. But that is amazing that when Steve Jobs said, look, when he made the iPhone, and Steve Jobs said, I want a mini computer with all the power of a normal computer in everybody's pocket, eventually. That's really happened. And that is so great. I love it. I absolutely love it. I remember watching the movie Hackers, which we've talked about on the show in the past. The movie Hackers, when I watched that, I was like, boy, it'd be so cool to really have like that mobile connection all the time, and to just be able to, because in that movie, it's very stylish, and like they're running around with their laptops, and they're, they have their rollerblades on, or they're skateboarding or riding a bike or whatever, and they're just able to, take it a whole electronic world with them. And now it can all be done in the palm of your hand. It's even better because I used to have to carry these huge backpacks. I used to, up until just a few years ago, I carried a huge backpack with me, with my laptop in it, which was a monster. And now you have all this power, even, essentially the power to control an airplane in the palm of your hand. It's good stuff. It's not bad stuff, folks. This isn't a bad story. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more.
Oh, yeah. This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovryn Tech Producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's PORC therapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. You know, Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But, baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I get to talk about whatever I want to talk about. My pick of the week could be a book, it could be a topic, it could be a comic, it could be a movie, a TV show, a product, website, anything. It could be anything, and I get to talk about it. And this week, I have something that some may find shocking that I'm going to talk about. I have a particular... This is something from one of the founding fathers of the United States. I have a particular distaste for, it used to be a respect when I was more institutionalist type. I think a lot of anarchists go through like a phase, where they slowly build up to like complete liberty. They go from like becoming kind of a conservative, maybe, kind of a constitutionalist, then a little more libertarian, then finally they become an anarchist down the line. And so, there was a time where I was, where I liked the founding fathers, full disclosure, but I really now I have a particular distaste for them because I think they were all liars. And, they made all these bold claims, even Thomas Jefferson, freedom, blah, blah, blah. And then they just started taking away those freedoms as soon as they could. Anyway, this founding father may not have been so bad. And this is Thomas Paine. Of course, he was never a politician, at least in the broad sense. So maybe that's why he, wasn't so bad. And this is actually a book called The Age of Reason. And it's a tremendous book considering its time frame, because it was written in... 1790. Well, it was written over a time span from like 1794 to 1807 or so. And it's really what it is. It's kind of an attack on the Bible and on institutionalized religion in general. It has a lot of quotes that, most people know Thomas Paine for his pamphlet Common Sense, that, George Washington had pushed around to everybody. But The Age of Reason is actually a lot of the quotes that people quote Thomas Paine for come out of this book. And they're good quotes. A lot of them are really, really good quotes. And you have to bear in mind that now I don't believe for a second that the government in America, the people I think were largely Christian, it was a largely Christian population, but the government of America was never Christian. It just wasn't. because, I mean, you look around, just go to Washington, D.C. This isn't conspiracy. It just is. One challenge I give to a lot of people is I want you to get a good view, like take a picture of the Vatican with the courtyard and everything, and then compare it to a picture of the Capitol of the United States in Washington, D.C., of the Capitol building. And oddly enough, they look exactly the same, right down to the Washington Monument. It's very easy to get confused. If you were looking at a side-by-side picture of the Vatican and the Capitol building and the Washington Monument, they look exactly the same. So now, granted, okay, the Vatican is a Christian building, so that just means that maybe the government was Catholic. No, I'm not saying that. It gets worse because Christians are really big on idol worship, like not having idol worship and things of that nature. And you look at, I mean, it's crazy enough to have what is essentially an Egyptian obelisk spire, in the middle of Washington, D.C., that being the Washington Monument. But then you look at where Lincoln, where Abraham Lincoln, if you look at the Lincoln Memorial, it's the Temple of Jupiter. It's an exact mock-up of the Temple of Jupiter. And there's other things like there's and this is all stuff made in the the 18th and 19th century. There's statues of George Washington where he's dressed like Zeus and he's like half naked, which is terribly impious. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's just a brief look at how unreligious I think our government always has been, or at least unchristian. They're definitely very religious. Just I don't think their religion is Christianity. It's something else. But anyway, so you have the Age of Reason, which is this really damning expose of the Bible, and it attacks Islam too, even though it doesn't directly go against the Quran. In fact, the version I have, it's called the Age of Reason Complete Edition, and I recommend getting this because the book was actually written in 3 parts. The average one that you get in, say, Barnes & Noble or some other bookstore is only part 1 and 2. And this one has part 3. It also has an introduction by a guy named Bob Robertson, who is, he has this organization where he believes in some kind of weird deism. It's deism that doesn't believe in a god, so I don't know, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's more like an evolutionary deism. It's this weird description, but anyway, he does a pretty good introduction to it, and I'm glad that him and his organization have made the book available in its complete form. The third part, the first and second part, maybe you've already read that as a listener. I have a very intelligent listener audience, and I'm so happy for that. And maybe you've already read the first 2 parts, but the third part gets into some interesting stuff. The third part isn't so much like a complete whole like the first and second parts are, but the third part is a lot of letters that he wrote to people because obviously people said, well, wait a minute, you said this about Moses, this isn't true. And then the third part would have his rebuttal. It would have the initial letter, and then it would have his rebuttal. It also talks about, he has theories on, before I talk about that, you definitely, with the third part, you also get the sense that, because when you read the first and second, you get the sense that he is a deist. Deist just means that you believe that there's a god, that there's a watchmaker, and that he pretty much walked away. You don't have to believe that with deism. With deism, you can also think that, maybe God has some involvement. But by and large, deism is usually referenced to mean someone who thinks that there is a creator, but that creator is an absentee landlord and just went off. But you definitely get the sense with the third part of the Age of Reason that actually Thomas Paine wasn't a deist at all. He was an atheist. And there's been documentaries I know I've seen over time that make the claim that he most certainly was an atheist. Maybe Thomas Jefferson was as well, despite his speech. Again, these guys lived in a culture where, conservatism, social conservatism was at its height probably. And that, Christianity just owned everything. If you weren't Christian, you might as well get killed, and many did. So, for them to like still kind of talk about a God, maybe they just didn't want to go too far, but you definitely get the sense in this book, and it's a great read. He gets some there's some inaccuracies in the points that he makes, but by and large, it's a really, really great, damning piece on the Bible and on any institutionalized religion. In fact, there's the famous quote, there's no greater tyranny than the tyranny of religion, that Thomas Paine said, and I totally agree. I think religion is 10 times more dangerous than government. And yeah, I know there's people, oh, God, the state is a religion. Yeah, okay, whatever. But at least the state isn't claiming supernatural powers. That's my point, is superstition and supernatural is, those are the dangers. The belief in those sorts of things is where, it reminds me of the quote, this isn't from Thomas Paine, but it reminds me of the quote, with or without religion, good people will do good things and bad people will do bad things. But only with religion will good people do bad things or evil things. And I think that's a fair point. The government won't, I don't think, well, I suppose there's some truth to that. The government can convince people to do evil things, but it's a little different when all bets are off, when the supernatural is telling you, okay, you need to go kill this amount of people or something like that. So anyway, the book is great as far as being very damning in that respect. And it's, like I said, the third part really showcases to me, in my opinion, that he was actually an atheist and way ahead of his time as far as that goes. In fact, he was ahead of his time in a lot of things. I think also, he's known, and this isn't from The Age of Reason, but Thomas Paine is known for making the comment that government is a necessary evil. Now, that's very interesting because while the necessity I disagree with, the fact that he recognized that it was evil, even if it were necessary, that it just is an evil, is fascinating. Way, way ahead of his time. Or maybe he relearned some things, from way back when. But anyway, obviously government isn't necessary, but that's besides the point. Another interesting thing that this book talks about is you get some of his insights into, because he was a Freemason when Freemasonry was very, very important to the founding of this country. That's not conspiracy. That's how it is. And he talks a little bit about what he thinks was the origin of Freemasonry. And this is what I was getting at earlier before I stopped and went to talk about his atheism. That too, okay, can you be an atheist and a Freemason? No, but then could you be an influential person in America and not be a Freemason back then? No. So again, it's the same thing, that yes, he could very well have been an atheist, even though he claimed to be other things. So he talks about the origin of Freemasonry, and there's a pretty lengthy, for a letter anyway, a pretty lengthy description about it all, and he chalks it all up to, he said Freemasonry is just the Druids. It's a continuation of the rituals of the Druids. Who are the Druids? They were like an Irish, or at least in the United Kingdom area. Of course, there wasn't a United Kingdom when there were Druids. They were a religious sect that had ideas that we don't know a whole lot about. It's a very, very interesting, though. A lot of people compared their ideas to the Mandeans. When the Mandeans is a religion, it's a Gnostic religion. It's somewhat Christian. It's not really Christian as in they believe in Jesus, but the Mandeans actually believe that the Messiah was John the Baptist, not Jesus Christ. So they're not exactly Christian, but they still hold to some of like those, like I guess what you could call Christian teachings. Again, they're Gnostic. The Druids were Gnostic as well, so I think that's part of like the comparison. Gnostic means, it comes from the word gnosis, which means knowledge. Gnostic is kind of the idea that this world is like some kind of bad trap that you're in. And the point is for you to perfect yourself to where you are no longer hindered by the constraints of this world. So if he compares Freemasonry to that, that's where that originated from, and that raises a lot of interesting questions. And of course, if you want to look into the history of Freemasonry, there's a million books about that. But anyway, check this book out, The Age of Reason Complete Edition by Thomas Paine. I think it's a tremendous read and way ahead of its time. And I didn't even talk about the Georgia Guidestones. Ooh, there's a teaser as far as Age of Reason goes. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll see you next week.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.